Okay, so like I said, happy fall. Now, I know I'm probably the last person to do this, but it is what it is. I wanted to do it anyway. And I know a lot of people start these videos with saying how fall is their favorite time of year. They're so excited. I am not one of those people. I do not like fall. I don't like winter. I'm an island girl through and through. The minute it starts to get cold is the minute I start to get sad, because I like to be warm. I like when I can feel sunshine on me. I like long days, long sunny days. So fall is a little bit of a depressing time for me because it's like, damn, about to be cold and dark all the time. And that's where we are. But with that being said, I thought I would still come and share some fall palettes. Because why not? Whew, I tried. Y'all, I tried. I tried to get into the fall spirit. Anyways, so like I said, I wanted to share with you guys some fall palettes. Now, I don't have a specific number. I just went into my drawers and I just started pulling palettes that I felt were very fall-like. And, you know, quick disclaimer, eyeshadow is not seasonal, so wear whatever you want whenever you want. So these aren't like relegated to being worn in the fall. These are just some palettes that made me think about, you know, the dying leaves, the changing of the seasons, that type of thing. So without further ado, let's just dive into my fall palettes. Some of these are old, some of these are new. So hopefully this will inspire you to pull out what you have in your collection without having to buy some of the new. Okay, so first up, I wanted to start with, well, I'm just going to grab and go. But the first thing that I have on my pile here is actually a palette that I keep forgetting that I have because it's one that I don't really reach for, and that is the Dark Mattes from Viseart. Now, Viseart is known for their matte shadows, so if you are a matte lover, if you are someone that likes all matte looks, I would definitely recommend that you give this one a try. It definitely has those deep, grungy tones that, in my opinion, are very reminiscent of, like, fall, leaves changing. Like, when I saw this, I was like, wow, that really does look like the trees outside. So I had to pull this one out to share. So if you do have this in your collection and you are, like I said, somebody who likes more matte shadows, I think that this is a good one for you to pull out for this time. It's also a great one to pair with your singles. So if you are someone that has a large singles collection and you just need some matte shades to pair things up with, that's also a really good one to reach for. Also from the archives is an oldie but a goodie, the Jackie Aina and Anastasia Beverly Hills palette. This is such a good one, just year round, but when I really looked at it, it definitely gave me fall vibes. And if I'm not mistaken, it did come out in the fall. But what I love about this is that it gives us a little bit of grunge and depth, which does make me think about like the changing leaves. So you do get some of, you know, like the purples that happen when the leaves are changing, some more like, you know, I don't want to call these coppery shades, but you know, a little bit of browns. I love that there's this multi-chrome here, sponsored, and I think Dwellers is a really nice one too that looks like, you know, the green kind of like dying. Let me stop talking about dying leaves. But really and truly, this does give me fall vibes. I feel like all of the mattes and all of the shimmers here remind me a lot of like the leaves changing. And this is honestly still, in my opinion, the best palette that ABH has come out with, and the quality is top notch. So if you have it, and I know so many of you guys have it, now is a really great time to pull it out. Next, I want to talk about two palettes that I actually think work really well together. And that is the Melt Cosmetics Gemini palette and the Melt She's in Parties palette. I originally thought about Gemini 1 and Gemini 2, but honestly, I think these two work better. So, Gemini 1 is that green copper story that I think is just stunning. Like, you do get something that's a little bit on the lighter side, but then you have these deep, rich green shades that I think bring the grunge that fall oftentimes calls for. And where I think that it pairs really nicely with She's in Parties is that She's in Parties brings that mauve aspect to it. So you have these really gorgeous mauve shades that go like really light, and then you get really deep and grungy. With Gemini 2, I feel like it stays pretty grungy. And I do think that with a lot of palettes, you need a little bit of lightness. You can't have everything be too grunge. So I feel like paired together, these two shadows really do give me that, like, you know, the purples of the leaves changing with some of the coppers and the greens together. So I really wanted to pair these two together. But that being said, I do think that they stand well on their own. I think you can get a really gorgeous green or gold look with this that is very reminiscent of fall with just using the Gemini palette. Or you can get a really nice mauve look that can go really deep in grunge. And I'm thinking like, you know, witch kind of purple mauvey look, which I think is also really fall. Because when I think about fall, I also start to think about Halloween. Don't really care for Halloween that much, to be honest. But I do think that you can do a really nice mauvey, deep, grungy look with She's and Parties. And paired together, I think they're honestly one of the best combos. So if you have Gemini and She's and Parties, pull it out, mix and match, you know. Smush some things together and see what you get. Moving right along, another palette that I want to talk about is the Adept Cosmetics Amulet palette. This, and you can see a theme here. It's like purple, grunge. That's where I'm going with my fall palettes. And I think this is a really nice one. What I love about this palette and why I wanted to pull this in is that even though it does look like it's a little purple heavy, you can go really neutral with this and like a deep grungy neutral. This is one of my favorite Adept palettes because it's like neutral but with a twist, if you know what I mean. Adept is known for like the super sparkly, high impact, high shine palettes. And this was very different from what they had out there. And I really like that I can go pretty neutral with this. Like I don't have to use the purple or the blue. There's a really nice, you know, matte shade and a matte brown, even the gray. And then the shimmers pair really well and aren't over the top. And they have that sort of shiftiness to it that honestly I think is really nice when you think about fall, because the leaves usually aren't one color. It's like a gradient as they fade out. And because there are multi-chromes in this palette, you know, that will kind of like shift green to purple, you can, in my mind, that's how I see the leaves changing. You start with green and it's like purple, orange, and, you know, fading away. And I think that because this has multi-chromes in it, it really does give that nice shift to it that's not over the top, which I appreciate. Next up is a palette from one of my favorite indie brands, and that is Sydney Grace. And I had to pull out my Temptalia palettes because I feel like the Temptalia trio has one for every season. And for me, the fall season has to go to the On the Horizon palette. Now, this is the deep version. They do, as you know, Sydney Grace palettes always do. They come in a light and a deep version. So this is the deep one. And I like that this is a more cool toned color story. I think that this is such an interesting palette. I really, really love this like copper shade here. And I feel like the shades here are like, honestly, in my opinion, like trios. When I see this, I see like, you know, 3 shades here, 3 shades here, 3 shades here. I love that I see those trios, and I think that it's such a beautiful one where you have like the copper, the green. You do get this kind of like blue-green shade, which is really interesting. And then you get this like mauve-y shade. Again, you see where I'm going. Mauve, copper, green. That's kind of like the gradient that I see when I look at this palette. And I love that this is on the cool tone side because a lot of times with fall palettes, and I'm thinking about like, you know, coppery shades, it can be really orange and it can be really warm. So sometimes it can be hard to find like a cool toned palette that has those fall vibes, at least for me. The next palette that I want to talk about is one that has been around for ages, supposedly discontinued, came back, Lord alone knows what's happening. That is the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. This was the one that I went so far to try and get, and I'm so happy I got it. This is a gorgeous palette, honestly, for the coppers. It does have some blues, it does have some greens, and this was kind of like I believe like the first real intro to Natasha's like cream to matte formula. So the cream to matte formula in here isn't necessarily her best. It's gotten better over the years. But I like the greens and the golds in this palette because the greens have that kind of olivey tone to it. There's a lot of variations in the golds and the coppers, which honestly what you see in the trees, like you get so many different oranges, golds, and copper shades that I think you can get all of that in this palette. So this is one that I really like. You also you get a really nice red shade, and sometimes you'll get those really vibrant bright reds in the fall. So this is definitely one that I really like. It is pretty repetitive, and some of these shades are very similar, and we honestly, after having this for a while, didn't need all of those oranges. But I think that if you have the Metropolis palette, this is one of the best times of the years to pull it out. And you guys will see, I tried to pick palettes that I hadn't seen a lot of people talk about, as well as really reach into my drawers and find the ones that I already have. I'll do some honorable mentions of some new ones though. Or one new one at least. Moving right along, I want to mention the MAC Feast Your Eyes palette. This, I believe, was a limited edition palette. This was actually friend meal, and I am so grateful for this palette because this is the MAC that we deserve. Like, please come back. This is a beautiful palette. Like, the shimmers in here are really soft and just stunning and gorgeous. And it has all the tones that I, talked about. The purple, the copper, the green. This shade right here is pretty much a topper, but it's such a nice one that it could go over any of the mattes and just give like really nice sparkle to it. Like, I don't think I hear a lot of people talk about this, but this was such a really nice palette, and it was very different because I feel like MAC, I don't know what MAC is/was doing, but when they released this, I was like, this is what we want from you, MAC. Please continue. So if you managed to snag this while it was available, this is definitely one that I think you should, reach back into your archives and pull out and use because it is a beautiful one. And the quality is pretty nice. Not the best on the market, or not the best out there, but pretty nice for what it is. Another one that I think people may have forgot about is the Makeup by Mario Master Metallics palette. Isn't she pretty? She's so pretty. Makeup by Mario is a brand that I don't know what it'd be doing. I feel like it's now become pretty known for its complexion products. But when they first launched, it had like these 3 eyeshadow palettes. The Master Metallics, the Master Mattes, and then I think another shimmery one. And this is actually one of those palettes that I really appreciated because it has those real soft, effortless shimmers that I like. These are really good one and done shadows. If you wanted to just plop one shadow in your lid and use a little bit of bronzer to buff it out, this is a palette that I think can do that. This is also a palette where you can just do an all shimmer look. I did an all shimmer look last year during my 12 Days of Christmas series using this. And it's one of those looks that still lives in my mind rent free because it was so pretty. And because the shimmers in here aren't like over the top sparkly, if you do an all shimmer look, it doesn't look crazy because it's not that like crazy lid shimmer type of shade, And I really liked this one. And you're probably looking at this like, how is this really fall? But I see like the coppers, the reds, these shades here are very much fall to me. Taking away sort of this blue, I think all of the other shades here do remind me of fall very much. And I really think that this was good quality. Maybe overpriced, but nice quality. You just have to like that kind of shimmer formula, Next, I want to talk about the only NARS palette that I own. And that is the NARS Climax Palette. This is what we want from NARS. They only gave it to us once. I don't know why, but I hope we get more. But this is gorgeous. And it's like glam. Gorgeous glam. This is a palette that I have traveled with several times, both within the US, outside of the US. It's one of those that I know is just going to give me a gorgeous look. Effortless look, not going to take a ton of time. And it's very neutral, but you can get a ton of different looks out of it. It has like the green, these 2 like neutral shades. One is more copper, one is like definitely, it's more silvery gold. All of these work really well, and you can get a ton of different looks out of this little 9-pan palette. This is the best palette that NARS has ever released, the most interesting palette NARS has ever released, and I think that this is such a beautiful fall palette. It's one of those that I think is for the just sort of neutral lover that wants something that's simple yet glam, not over the top sparkly, not a lot of glimmer. Hands down, just an amazing palette, in my opinion, for fall. And I have a drugstore palette for you guys. Yes, I own drugstore makeup. Don't look at me like that. And that is the Flower Punk. Is it Flower Punk? Flower. This is, that girl? What's your name? Jesus, what is her name? Drew Barrymore's line. Flower Beauty, I think that's what it's called. She has this Jungle Lights palette. Now, my palette is broken. This is my second palette. Every time I ordered it, Ulta shipped it and it arrived broken. But what I like about this palette is that it literally has every single color that I was telling you guys about. You have a copper shade, a gold shade, a green shade, a purple shade, a light purple gray shade, and then a champagne. This is every single shade of tree. Like, this is every single shade that you get when the trees change. And this is a really nice shimmer formula. Honestly, for a drugstore, the quality is nice. This palette retails for, I believe, $17.99 or $19.99. So it's definitely not the cheapest drugstore palette. But you have to take into account how big these pan sizes are. This is not a standard eyeshadow size. And I will say that the quality definitely feels more high-end than drugstore. So it is one that if you have it, I definitely recommend you pick it up. If you were looking for a good drugstore quality palette, the shimmers in here are amazing. What I will say about this though is that, as you can see, it's an all shimmer palette. So you're gonna have to dig into your mattes to find a matte palette that you can pair it with. Unless you want to do like a one and done, because this is also one that you can plop on the lid and then take a little bit of bronzer in the crease and, you know, buff out the edges. Simple, easy peasy, but it's gorgeous and it's not super high sparkly. There's not a lot of glitter in there, but you do get really nice shine. I honestly can say with my whole chest that the quality of that is high end. And y'all know I don't really own drugstore like that. So for me to have that in my collection still speaks volumes. Okay, we only have like a handful of palettes left, so let's keep going. Next up is another affordable palette that is no longer available, but if you have it, which I'm sure a lot of you do, you should definitely pick it up. And that is the Colourpop At Forest Sight palette. Now, this was a collab with Raw Beauty Christie. And honestly, it's gorgeous. This is the only Colourpop palette that I would consider keeping, because this is the only Colourpop palette that I have felt like the quality was amazing. I have bought palettes after this one and I am like, what is happening? And I don't know if it's because this was a collab and it was just a little bit elevated in terms of the formula, but the mattes in here are stunning, pigmented, blendable, and as you can see, you have those sort of red shades, the orange shades, the green shades, and I think that this is such a beautiful green that really does give me like the tree changing from green to purple vibes. It's a beautiful palette, and the quality in here is nothing like Colourpop quality, because I've tried Colourpop shadows after this and none of them have touched the quality of this palette. The one thing that you may want to be mindful of is that this black shade here is one of those blacks that has orange micro glitters in there. So it is a shimmer. You can blend it out to use it as a matte, but it is a shimmer shade. So just something to keep in mind. And it actually reminds me a lot of the shades or the mattes in the Melt Amore Mariposa's palette. Just saying. Speaking of, if you don't have the At Forest Sight palette and you have the Melt Amore Mariposa's palette, honestly, similar color story. Different quality, but similar color story. The mattes in here are definitely more pigmented, more vibrant. These are pressed pigments instead of shadows, so that is a part of it. But these are just gorgeous, stunning, some of the best, you know, mattes that you will find on the market. I want to hold it up to the Colourpop shadow so you can really see what I mean in terms of, you know, a very similar color story. So that way, if you don't have the At Forest Sight and you do have the Melt palette, you can really see all of these shades are pretty dupable. I don't know if this is still available, the Melt palette, but if it is, I know that it was on super sale for like $28. So something you might want to consider picking up if you really like this color story. But as you can see, it has those greens and the oranges and the mauve burgundy shades that I just think are stunning, and you can't really beat this Melt quality, especially not for the price. Next up is the Druid palette from Fantasy Cosmetica. This palette still makes me drool, still gives me tingles. This is one of those palettes that I think just is, it's stunning. It makes me gasp. It's like amazing, gorgeous. It's also one of those palettes that has multi-chromes in there, and one of the things I love about multi-chromes is that they make you look like you tried harder than you actually did. And the other thing too that I like about multichrome, specifically for fall, is that you get to see all of the gradients. Like I said, when you see the trees changing, it's usually not like suddenly one color. It's usually like a gradient, and you see that fade out. And I feel like with multichromes, you can really see that. So with the multichromes in here, you do have some of that green to purple shift. There's a really nice copper shade. You do have some of these really kind of like grungy, mossy type mattes. I think that this is the best palette that the brand has put out. This is the entire reason that I keep following this brand so closely, because the quality of this was great. The color story is so well thought out. And one of the things that I appreciate about Fantasy Cosmetica is that with the 9-pan palettes that they create, you get looks. Sometimes brands will give you a 9-pan palette and it's like, okay, you can do 2, maybe 3 looks. But with the Fantasy Cosmetica palettes, I found that I see so many different looks just from 9 shades, which makes the palette seem so versatile. And sometimes you'll get like a 15-pan palette and you're like, I don't see a ton of looks. But with this Druid palette, there's so many different things that you can do with all of the shades there. And the matte to shimmer ratio is really good in terms of like you have a really nice balance, but also that the mattes complement all the shimmers, which I know is really hard to do with such limited amount of shades. This one is still available. I actually have a code with Fantasy Cosmetica. It's just Jamila. I think it saves you 10 or 15%. It is affiliated though, so I do get a kickback. So if you were interested in picking this one up, you can use my code and save money. You don't have to use my code. I say that all the time. Just use somebody code. Please don't pay full price for makeup if you don't have to. Next up, Odin's Eye Cosmetics. Did y'all see them Christmas palettes? Oh, child. I'm so excited for them new Christmas releases. But anyways, we're talking about the Red Dragon palette right now. This is a really simple palette, but a gorgeous one. It packs, pretty decent punch. Is it the most versatile? No. Because to be quite honest, I feel like you get warm reddish looks and green looks. The multichrome in here though is really nice because it does shift green to red, orange-y, which I like. I think it's a really beautiful multichrome. But overall, it doesn't give you a lot of versatility, but what it does do is give you real nice looks. This is, in my opinion, kind of like the Nomad Hudson Valley palette where you have green, red, kind of mixed together. So if you have this one, I think that you can do so much with it. You may not need to buy the Hudson Valley one if you already have this one. And this one does have a multi-chrome and more shimmers. But it's definitely one that I recommend pulling out. It's beautiful. It's definitely going to give you more of those warm tones though. So you're not going to get any cool tones out of this one if you don't like warm tones. This is a nice one. And I know it was limited edition, so if you didn't get to pick it up when it was on sale, I am sorry. I apologize. Why are I apologizing? This ain't my fault. Speaking of the Nomad Hudson Valley, I had to mention this one because this is literally fall in a palette. This is kind of the perfect fall palette. I think that this is one of the best mattes I've experienced from Nomad. Their mattes have always been really great, but it does feel like there's a little extra something in these mattes and they works really well. Now you do get something that's a little bit more cool, something that's a little bit more warm. Only 3 shimmers, but I think that the shimmers pair well with either side, so that's not something you have to worry about if you were concerned about it. But I will say overall, stunning palette. Definitely fall in a palette. If you like mattes, if you are a matte girl, same with like the Viseart palette, I think that this is a great one for you to reach for, pull out, purchase, whatever it is, because I do think that this is honestly one of the most perfect representations of fall there is. Like, look at the packaging. Oh, like you see, this is what I mean by the trees changing. And I think that they took this and turned it into like shades that perfectly match. 2 shades left. I mean, 2 shades, 2 palettes left. Next up, I want to talk about the Natasha Denona Trio Chrome palette. Now, I was going to go with like the Sunrise or the Sunset palette, but I felt like, yeah, I guess. So I wanted to take something that's a little bit more interesting. So I pulled out my Trio Chrome palette and I looked at it and I was like, honestly, this does make me think of fall. The Trio Chrome isn't what I see as a vibrant, super bright palette. And it has some of those really weird, unique matte shades that I feel like I see when the trees start to change. You know, the greens look a little bit different. The purples look a little bit different. And it has these multi-chromes that, again, also remind me of the gradient in which a lot of these shades of the, like, trees shift. So, like, the green to gold copper shift, you know, purple to green shift. I think that these definitely give me really strong fall vibes in a really unique way, where it's not the typical bright orange, vibrant copper shades. So if you have the Triochrome palette, I think you should definitely consider pulling it out. I will also say that the Triochrome palette, in my opinion, is like the best mattes I've ever experienced from Natasha. And these mattes that she included here are very unique. Such unique shades. And then finally, the last palette that I want to talk about. Y'all know I had to bring my girl Patricia into this. I love me some Patricia. And I had to pull out my Midnight Sun palette. One, because it's my favorite palette Patricia has ever created. And two, I think it's like fall in a palette. Is this not fall? First and foremost, these two shades right here, this terracotta matte shade is perfection. And then you have the copper special shade in her formula. Again, really gorgeous. I think this purple is such a beautiful shade. It pairs really nicely with the copper shimmer as well. And then even when you cover up these special shades, I feel like the 6 mattes in here, in my opinion, perfectly represent what I see as fall. And this is one of those palettes that just warms my heart and soul and makes me so happy. It's like a year-round palette for me, but I feel like especially now, I am like, yes, I need to leave this on my desk because Patricia needs love, and this is one of the best. It is her best palette, in my opinion. My humble opinion, it's her best palette. And I do think that this is such a great fall palette and such a perfect representation of fall. All right. The sun is beginning to set. I have been filming for like 4 hours at this point. My voice hurts. I am still getting over, you know, my sickness, so I don't want to push myself too far before I lose my voice again. But yeah, that is it. Those are all of the palettes that I think you should pull out for fall. I know it was a lot. I have no idea how much it is. I didn't count it before. I'm not going to count it now. But I hope you guys enjoyed seeing some of the fall palettes that I have in my collection. I would love to know from you what palettes you'll be pulling off for fall. So leave it down in the comments below. Let me know what you thought about the palettes that I chose. All of that good stuff. If you liked this video, I would absolutely love if you would hit that like button. One thing I do want to flag is that if you were planning on picking up any of these palettes, I will have them linked down below. If I have any codes for any of these palettes, I will have that link down below as well if you do want to pick them up using my code and get a discount. So all of that. And remember, Black Friday coming up, so just hold on a little bit. Hold on. You know, Black Friday will be here. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed seeing this video. As always, I love you so very much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, you know, all that jazz. And I will catch you guys in my next one. Bye!